20 that are currently open.
Cool. We got 15 on the clock.
15 on the clock. Yes, thanks again for everybody who has tuned in. Again, you'll be able to get a recording of the YouTube or of the presentation. We'll upload it to YouTube. We'll send you the link there. And let's go through and tackle a lot of these questions. So Colin asks, how does the hierarchy of the knowledge graph interact with how we decide to structure site content? So that is a very complex question that requires sort of exporting a lot of keywords out from your competitors, your Google Search Console, and then analyzing the search engine results page to see what kinds of intents people are actually interested in. And then usually it's this whole, like, you got 20 spreadsheets, you're like looking at SERPs and like trying to amalgamate everything like together. And it just highly depends on like the topic that you're writing about. I'd say that certain like industries or certain classes of keywords have very similar structures. So in B2B, right, just as a very clean example for SEO, you can imagine people are always going to want to know, what is SEO? How to do SEO? Why SEO? SEO best practices, examples, that sort of thing. So you can use these sort of lightweight templates, but understand that, right, if you're in B2C or you're selling a consumer packaged good, well, these are all completely different frameworks of knowledge graph depending on the topic that you're writing about. Pavel says content pruning guides.
Yes, we will share them in our follow-up. It'll be the animals one written by Jimmy Daly's at Superpath Now. It's really the best one, so we'll share that. Yeah.
Cool. So Morgan asks, is Clearscope giving better results in more competitive markets with loads of existing web pages for topics, i.e. the United States, than in less competitive markets? So yeah, essentially, the more competitive a content ecosystem is, then the stronger Clearscope recommendations will be. Because if you're not familiar with Clearscope, we scrape the top 30 results and use natural language processing to then give you recommendations on entities that pair with Google's knowledge graph. That said, perhaps the more interesting question is not that Clearscope is giving better results, say, from a geo perspective, but Clearscope is giving better results on search queries that deserve articles, right? If you're running a Clearscope report on something that's best serviced through a video, we're just going to be looking at less text-based content. So that's a better way of thinking about when Clearscope is going to be, well, more impactful is when text is a more compelling part of what a search query deserves. Magdalena asks, to my understanding, we're also talking about content gaps somehow. Is there a tool you can recommend to identify them, or is there going to be a feature available from your site? That's a tough one. So content gaps, right? Yes, this is what we're talking about. But perhaps more importantly, I think the better framing of it is intent gaps. And it's hard to actually have a tool that figures out intent gaps because topics are
emerging, and some of the most interesting intent gaps are the ones that have yet to be written, that will be experimented with in the future and then build from there. So yeah.
Totally. Like if you Google the Google AMP, there's a great one by Polemic Digital that says Google AMP can go to hell. That's literally what it says. It ranks like number 4 for Google AMP. And it's not like we would have been able to ever know that that's a thing from a complete not like knowing the subject perspective. So the best way to think about it is you are subject matter experts in all kinds of different fields, industries, and things. And being okay, you should be okay, feel like it's okay to make a bet on an intent that you think is going to matter in the future, right? So kind of making bets on what will be is a very compelling and interesting idea in SEO moving forward. And again, that obviously depends on the question or the subject or query that you're asking. All right,
Content pruning, yes. What if Google already gave me a chance and not many people clicked on my blog post? What should I do? Archiving these would not be good for me. Yeah, so in that case, I would take a very deep look at probably a core section of your archive, the ones that you actually are thinking these are like kind of, if I think about my archive, these are the pillar topics that I'm covering, and I would do a refresh on them, right? Like Bernard was saying, initially ranking, make Google take a closer look, right? Especially if you're going to be deleting almost half your blog at that point. So I would first start with content refreshes and pick the articles that are matching the search intents that are available now. So I would try to really just look at the SERP. I would discover the intents, refresh the content to fit those needs using a tool like Clearscope, right? To make sure you're on the optimization track, and then seed those and see how it goes from there. I think when you think about then deleting your archive, you should really think about things that actually do not fit into the readers you're trying to reach. Content pruning is really about, if you're trying to speak to somebody that you're not really like, you shouldn't really be, because that's not really you're going for, but you're trying it anyways, that's a piece of content I would consider pruning over refreshing.
Awesome. Everybody wants to know about content
pruning. Yeah, we're gonna have to do one.
All right, so Daniel asks, will Clearscope have a feature to identify content deterioration? For example, identifying content from Google Search Console, which is decreasing, and flagging that content and creating a workflow to refresh that piece. Well, I guess the cat should be out of the bag.
You doing it?
We are doing it. We're calling it content health. It's going to be one of the next major features of Clearscope, but it's exactly what we've been preaching, right? Is that content should change based on topical change, and content therefore decays. The, I guess, biggest problem that we've run into so far is that, yes, we can point to an example like coronavirus and see, look, what was an A+ this week is now like a B- the next week. And that's really cool, because it is really cool. But topics don't change as frequently as you think they do.
Yeah.
And so the majority of what our internal, like when we're thinking about it, it's like, okay, A+ this week, A+ next week, A+ the following week. And so we're trying to figure out how to make that more compelling to you, which is also in line with this idea that we have about content themes. Very cool. Can't wait to show you. Yes. Wish I could. We did ask our product team to see if we could get it, but it was just not meant to be.
If you check out Bernard's Twitter, he dropped a very compelling screenshot of it up there.
There's a snapshot of it. Sue asked, what feature are you talking about? Probably in relation to the GPT-3 outline generator. Yes, that's like where citations are currently living, but we're going to shift them to the right-hand side, making a research tab. It's going to have content themes, it's going to have questions, citations, competitors, and links out to Quora, Reddit, Wikipedia to help you refine and
jumpstart your research.
Your subtopics. Conrad says, yes, still doing the reoccurring CS reports. Yes, that is content health, which we're very excited about. Stephen Laugh says content king is really terrific. Absolutely is. That's what we recommend checking out for your technical SEO considerations. Limer asks, would it be possible to improve the custom keywords feature so lists of custom keywords can be added? Oh, okay. That's interesting. We do recognize that the added terms thing is kind of a little light.
Hanging out. It's chilling.
But we'll certainly take that feedback and bring it to our product team. Thanks for suggesting that. So Anonymous asks, do we have to unpublish the old article link and then redirect it when we are pruning? Good question. I would say, like everything, right? It depends. Do we have to unpublish? So in my experience, which I can really only speak to, right, from my experience and perspective, in that case, we would then just create a net new piece of content and not really think about the old article link anymore. It would be remain unpublished in the archive and create a net new piece of content to still gain that traction, because the issue I think with redirecting it, and I think Bernard, you could speak, correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't really want to be redirecting to something that was not working. So you really want to just kind of enter a clean slate article into it versus redirecting. That's what I would say. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense to me. I'd say just don't overthink it too much, right? If it wasn't working in the first place, like either just completely remove it or link it to the homepage.
Mhm.
I would generally stick towards removing it unless it had a link or some traffic,
Yes.
and then obviously looking at related subtopics, which if you have some time, take a look at that.
Mhm.
Anonymous asks, I was always taught to externally link to .gov or .edu. Should I be looking at what resources the top 10 are externally linking to and follow their lead? In a nutshell, this is one of those, right? It depends. And the reason why externally links to .gov, .edu was a thing is because Google thought, okay, if you're linking out to external authorities, then it's going to be more important. That's to say that search queries that deserve credibility are going to be rewarded by when links out to .gov websites. So this is why when you look at Clearscope's citation thing, when we're doing our backend analysis, we found for health-related things, PubMed, NIH.gov, NHS, right? There's a crap ton of links out to those because people understand that for medical-related things, if they're going to be making claims like drinking a glass of wine is healthy for your heart, then you gotta have to back that up, right? But if I'm writing a piece of content on how SEO works, I'm not going to be linking to some .gov website for no reason. That doesn't make any sense. So that's kind of why search query deserves X is an important concept to understand. Jennifer asks, what's the easiest way to get a full list of all live pages and URLs on your site to do a content audit?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good question.
So the way that I do that is just look at your Google Analytics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Just
take
take
it
the
down.
last 12 months of things and then just export that and then filter it by what's getting organic traffic.
Yeah, I would look at, especially Search Console, taking it from there. I would look at
Yeah.
your impressions and your page position and kind of use like a pivot table to really then spot where pieces of content are kind of dead in the water currently.
Totally. Jesse asks, any thoughts on search intent as a problem aware, solutions aware, product aware instead of research transactional? Absolutely, absolutely, right? I personally hate the idea of people taking the infinite range of intents and literally trying to squeeze them into 8 buckets. Informational, transactional, it bothers me.
Which is why the research and this idea of themes has we've been noodling with it for so long to really think about what that right word is.
Yes. So I hate it. I mean, I use it as the example because people have been using it as their examples, but I'm personally very much like you, just saying there's problems, solutions, right? Questions, these kinds of things that people care about. I think that's the better way to approach it for sure.
I think I can take Nick.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So with YouTube video quickly rising as a search engine, how can we incorporate more videos into our content without starting a YouTube channel? Have you seen any success with embedded video? So in my experience, when a search query deserves a video, it would behoove you to put one in your content. And I really think about using videos and YouTube in the same way that I think you can think about linking out. If it is a really good resourceful video that's going to add value to your content, that is going to keep someone on your page learning with you as part of your article, then that would be very valuable. And I have personally seen results when a search query, if you Google autocomplete, right? I think my best one is sandbox tree that I can explain. If you type in sandbox tree, it's a tree that has fruit that explodes and sends death spikes everywhere. But basically, when you look that up, you'll see that one of the popular Google autocomplete suggestions with it is sandbox video or sandbox tree video. And so then when I included a lot of things in this one particular article, but I included a video in this idea of above the fold, right? 2 paragraphs down, I was able to place that article on the first page of Google, bumping out Ripley's Believe It or Not for that. So this is my experience in saying that using YouTube videos when the content deserves it, I think would really behoove you. It also does help with your average time on page. So
absolutely,
a little tricky sneak there.
Yeah. So you don't have to create your own YouTube channel. You can just borrow other people's stuff to obviously help them with the resources. It's the same idea as external links, right? It's like you don't always have to create your own stuff. You can recognize that some people have created
It's
some
altruistic to help each other out, right?
some
We're
nice
all out
stuff.
here together trying to
Yes.
create a better internet.
All right, Heather asks, how do you create trustworthy best of X content for a client who needs their product on that list in the post? Really, you have to basically talk about all of the competitors that make sense, right? A good example is, say, American Express comes to us and they say, we want to rank for best credit cards. You say, great, you run a Clearscope report. Clearscope's going to recommend that you talk about Chase Sapphire, Citi Double Cash. And then Amex looks at that and says, whoa, 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 that's not okay. We just want Amex credit cards. It's like, yes, that makes sense. But you can imagine if the person's doing a search and they don't see Chase Sapphire Reserve and all they see is your own branded stuff, they're less likely to find what they needed. So really, the answer is you got to talk about all of the industry leaders in that particular category. And ideally, you have pictures of all of the products with you or somebody who's reviewing it using or tasting or whatever the right thing is for the product, and saying, okay, this is what happened. Also back that up with objective criteria. So you can imagine for blenders, right? People will like buy a noise gauge and they're like, oh, see, this one's at 15 decibels and that one's at 12, so it's like quieter, right? Or they'll like say, okay, this is like a big thing of like clay and it took 5 minutes for it to blend into like a very small like puree, but that one took 3 and it was less loud. So that's that, right? So really think about the criteria that somebody should be evaluating that category on, and then talk about all of those in a very compelling manner.
Great, John. Okay, what's up, dude? How's it going? John Duffley. How important are content refreshes in the early stage of building domain authority? If I'm creating content for a site with limited DA at the moment, could republishing this content more often help it hurt its growth in the first 6 to 12 months? So I would say in this case that you do want to be thinking about your core subject matter for that site. What is that site truly trying to speak to? And then I would really focus on building a stack of like 20-ish articles that really speak to that core experience. I would watch those and republish those and refresh those as the content is changing. I don't really, actually, Bernard, do you want to speak to this idea of like, could republishing content help hurt? In my experience, it's just always going to be encouraging Google to take a closer look when you republish. So it's always going to be signaling to Google that you're keeping your website even up to date. And those core pieces that you want the user to really care about are still being updated, and you're proving to Google that you're an active publisher who is putting out good content.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Like instead of going like, let's increase our publishing cadence to more, we should be thinking, how do we take care of what we have, right? And so refreshing it for the sake of refreshing it, I'm not going to recommend that.
Right.
But if something like the best example is, say you're writing something about something legal, we'll call it that a new law is passed that makes gambling legal in the state of Texas, something like that. If you, were writing a piece of content on the online gaming, state of things, then any time that happens is a trigger event, which would then encourage you to go back to your piece of content to refresh it, make it more relevant, right? That's the best way to think about why refreshing content is important. A bank issues a new credit card, you got to talk about the credit card in your best credit card example. A bank deprecates support or changes the terms on an existing credit card, you got to update your content to stay relevant. So in lieu of that, right, we have a lot going on in our lives. People will just put in different refresh cadences based on just a broad high level idea of how quickly a topic seems to be evolving. I'd say generally in the most aggressive of content categories, like news related things, best credit cards is kind of up there. Like once a week-ish is like the most competitive categories. I would say general best practice once a year makes sense because you've seen it in the title tags, updated 2021 or just the timestamps. I think I've tested this before, but I think there's a threshold of content change is like about 20% of like the body of the text, for Google to actually respect that the timestamp change makes sense, because a lot of SEOs kind of game the timestamp change without changing the body. So Google's gotten a little bit smarter about that. All right, Jennifer asks, I know we're going over now, but we figure
if you're here, we're here.
yeah,
so
you're
I mean,
here,
we're
we're
hanging
here.
out.
Yeah, we'll keep going.
Yeah.
Perhaps we'll cut like the video
Yeah.
to like to
A Q&A
yeah.
bit.
All right, so Jennifer asks, SEO best practices are changing all the time and everyone thinks they are an expert. What sources do you use or follow to stay in the know and up to date? That's a good question. So I guess we have the benefit of working with all you wonderful customers.
Yes.
And we actually get all of our intel mostly from
experience.
You. Yeah.
What's actually happening out there right now.
We sit down with as many customers as we can. We show them what's happening. We explain how to approach it. And a lot of you come back to us and say, hey, this didn't work, or hey, this did work. Like a recent example, there was a directory website that does, it's sort of like Airbnb, but for Europe. And they came in, they're like, Bernard, we want to try Clearscope. And I was like, well, first, right, that as a concept is not queries that deserve text-based content. Yeah. But I'm still willing to give you, the set of reports for you to experiment with Clearscope just to see whether or not it makes a difference. Guy emails me earlier today and said, yeah, nothing happened. And I'm like, yeah, that's sort of expected because, the entities don't really matter as much for the queries that you're going after. Yeah. So we do get a lot of experience and fun, if you will, interacting with all of you, making recommendations, all that good stuff. Yeah. Olivia asks, I've noticed Google has started jumping to the section of the page it thinks is more relevant to your query, skipping the intro, any subtopics it thinks aren't relevant. Does this have any implications of how we should approach the on-page content optimization? My instinct, and I've noticed this too, and it's very annoying because I've gone to articles and tried to pull the URL, and then I've got that whole text string that Google has applied to the end of it. My instinct is to really think about what piece of your article is being jumped to, look at the query that you're ranking for, because I have a hunch that this is how Google is determining emerging topic perspectives. Absolutely. So I would pay close attention to what is happening and where that article, where Google is taking you directly, and consider then kind of moving forward. Now, that doesn't really talk to this idea of how we should approach on-page content optimization. I'm kind of spinning this into, this is a very interesting tool that Google could be giving us to see what is going to be then ranking next, like the what will be. Totally. Yeah. I mean, like, if you think about it, Google is literally saying that that section, sentence, whatever on your site is more relevant to help the user. So an approach that you should consider is just take that section and put it at the top. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And just like answer that first. Yeah. And understand that, right? Google is giving you a nod, a shortcut, and saying, look, and also do that competitively. Yes. Right? You can imagine if you see a competitor being linked to their little paragraph, be like, that's important. Right. You could create a single piece of content that literally just answers that particular intent and get straight to the point. And maybe you're going to be dominating the SERPs before you know it. Yeah. Jacqueline asks, given the fact that topic perspectives change, does that mean we should avoid publishing topic cluster guides entirely, or simply that we should keep an eye on emerging perspectives, regularly update the guides? Yeah, so you should still create topic clusters and guides. These still work really well for really broad topics, right? Where somebody is expecting a broad brushstroke of things, right? Yes. So if somebody's searching for, like Japan travel guide, I know you're in travel, then a topic cluster that's like best times to visit, best places to go, right? This still makes a lot of sense because that's exactly where the user is in their like journey. Processing. Exactly, yeah. Of what they're trying to do, how to plan it, all of that good stuff. Mm-hmm. So definitely keep the topic cluster, except add to it based on the emerging things. one of the ideas that we like to recommend specifically with travel is this concept of seasonal change.
I love
right?
this example.
Yeah, it's like if you imagine you create things to do in Tokyo in the spring, in the summer, in the fall, in the winter, 4 separate pieces of content of the different seasons. Well, guess what? You set up your content to cover the
All
seasonal
4
shift.
seasons.
And you can imagine, right, when those seasons come and go, that maybe your content pieces actually cycle, but you have something to fit the emerging topic perspective seasonally. And so you're not getting slammed because you're specifically focusing on a particular season or not talking about the seasons
Right,
whatsoever.
where subject matter authority comes into play. Write one seasonal post well, write a second one, and then you have a high probability of all 4.
Totally, totally. Norman asks, regarding search journey, our brand is very similar to a different product that has a different source of traffic. Therefore, we have a lot of traffic that doesn't satisfy the search intent. Would you recommend going for long tail keywords anyways, even if we can't possibly win against the volume of a different search intent for our brand name? That's a good question. I usually like to talk about the idea of a navigational search when it comes to this. So the example that I use is backpacks. It's like if I do a search for backpacks, then you get, Walmart, REI, Amazon, or something like that. The reason why you get those is because when somebody did a search for backpacks and did not get that, they had to go back to Google and perform a search that was backpacks Amazon, therefore giving the user or training Google to say that a search result without Amazon for backpacks is bad. Therefore, you see, Amazon eventually graduates to ranking for backpacks as the topic. So if you can imagine, we'll call it, make it easy, 100 people searching for backpacks every month, then every time Google presents a search engine results page with Walmart, REI, Amazon, then we will say 80% of the people are finding what they needed. Now we want Bernard to rank for Bernard's backpacks. And so when that comes into play, you have to imagine that I have to influence that set of 100 people every month to say that, okay, 10% of them, when they do a search for backpacks and they don't see Bernard's backpacks, then they re-perform the search for Bernard's backpacks and then find what they need. So you can imagine that trains Google to then link Bernard's backpacks to backpacks. That is a long-winded way of saying this is why PR is actually a search engine optimization strategy. This is why you saw Credit Karma do a lot of stuff surrounding credit scores. So people would Google credit scores, not find Credit Karma because they saw the TV ad and then re-perform it with Credit Karma. So Credit Karma gets linked to that particular topic. That said, I would still recommend going for long tail keywords anyways, because the winning of your brand name, you might have something that's like, close to say Amazon, like in sound or whatever, kind of sucks, but you still got to play the game how you got to play the game. Mario says, great stuff. Can you talk a little bit more about how to determine if you should focus on one aspect of a topic, answering one popular question versus creating a comprehensive piece of content covering all of the top questions around it? He's new to SEO.
Okay, yeah, well, I think it's really important to look and think about then, when we say monthly search volume is not indicative of size of opportunity, I think this is a case where it is very important to take it into account and to determine then the different perspectives, how people are currently looking for them, and then determining for your blog, where your publication, what your best approach is. Because if you say create a bunch of different pieces of content about something and they all don't do well, then you actually probably might have been better served creating a comprehensive piece of content that covers everything to show Google that you have subject matter authority in this realm. So I think it depends on how well you've kind of focused on that topic already, how important it is to your content calendar and planning, and determining from there whether or not you're a best fit for seeding multiple articles based on how you're currently ranking or creating one piece of comprehensive content.
Totally. Anonymous asks, my content for a new client, 1 month with them, is not ranking when I publish new articles. I published almost 4 to 5 a week, have a decent domain ranking, but the new content is not getting crawled. Any tips to start ranking faster? Generally, this is if they're actually really not getting crawled. It's generally a reflection that perhaps the domain itself has a lot of sandbags that are weighing it down.
The hot air balloon.
Yes, yes. So like perhaps content needs to be pruned if that is exactly what's happening. It might be that they are getting crawled. Obviously, you could in the past, I think, force Google to crawl a page. I believe they may have deprecated or removed that functionality. But the way to do it would be to build a backlink or two to a page, right? Again, that forces Google to take a closer look, or optimize the content for entities using a content optimization tool that will, again, hopefully get Google to take a look. It's a little less likely if it's literally not getting crawled. So a link is actually the fastest way of getting Google to take a look. If it's not getting crawled, if it's not doing well, then but getting crawled, then an entity like content optimization tool or pruning some of the sandbags off of the site would be the way. Phil asks, should all these emerging topic perspectives all be different pages? That is exactly it.
It depends.
We're calling it ranch style
Yeah.
SEO. And generally speaking, the idea is, yeah, absolutely, right? People have different perspectives. You only have one title tag. You only have one above the fold experience, right? So take advantage of this idea that you can come up with a better answer to a question that somebody is likely to have and said in a more concise and compelling way. And that is how to win. Stephen asks, when starting a content strategy, is it better to choose low volume, long tail keywords with high intent across multiple topics, or in the same cluster first? Okay, which is a better way to build trust and authority as a subject matter expert as you accelerate your publishing. Right, okay. So the idea that Stephen is asking is whether you should go horizontally deep or vertically deep, right? So you can imagine that I am starting a website about recipes, and I'm talking about dessert recipes. So I can go horizontally and talk about pie recipes, cake recipes, and
parfait
yes,
recipes.
right, exactly. Or I can go vertically, right, and talk about cheesecake recipes and shortcake recipes and whatever kinds of recipes. So which one's better? I think that a vertical approach is better just based on
what we've seen.
Yeah, Shannon's experience with drink health benefits.
Yes, food health benefits never ranked, never did well.
Yeah, so you can think of it that like vertical within a very specific vertical is actually the way, right? So not even just saying cheesecake recipes and pie recipes, but going pie recipes and then saying, you know, like how to make pie crust and like all of this stuff.
Yes.
Like that's sort of the right way to say, not even just that, but like you can imagine like cherry pie recipe, best crust, right? Like best cherry recipe pie crusts. And then you kind of like win there. And then you like go into cherry pie recipes, apple pie recipes, and then you go into that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I love this next one.
All right.
Lori, hello. A piece of content receives an A+ grading, A++, mind you. Shout out there. Grade in Clearscope, but then is flagged for content issues in WordPress via Yoast. Why does this occur and how to reconcile it? So I will say I've experienced with this, and that's because Clearscope is looking simply at the text of your content on the page. I think we might need to like get a little more clarification. Oh, that's funny in chat. We might need to get a little more clarification on like maybe what particular errors and flags you're seeing. But I will be very frank in that I've come from a publication that used Yoast religiously we introduced Clearscope, and I did not necessarily think much about keyword recommendations from Yoast in that sense.
Right.
When you're thinking about the text on the page, this is what Clearscope is doing with an A++, saying you are comprehensively covering this enough. That is not what Yoast is looking at. And so I think you need to either kind of think about, is it technical issues that Yoast is spotting? If it's keywords and using it too many times, I would default to Clearscope's recommendations there, but also be very mindful that you don't want to keyword stuff and consider your keyword density.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Magdalena says, are you going to come up with a version for Portuguese? We have a very special like internal algorithm that figures out signal to noise, and we have not found a compelling way to do it yet with other languages, Portuguese included. We do have it on the roadmap to figure how that could be done, but in lieu, I'm not going to promise that we're going to do it, but it's something that we're taking a look at. Tyler asks, is it worth writing content for 0 search volume queries according to Ahrefs? If so, what keywords should we use when optimizing the content in Clearscope? So first, according to Ahrefs, I'm not sure what you mean with that qualifier. I'd say it is absolutely worth writing content for 0 search volume queries for intents that you see surfaced in the search engine results page, right? So back to this idea here, right? If you see that there's this perspective that people care about, is it beneficial or just a fad? In the search engine results, that indicates that there is interest, that the user cares about that. So I don't know how Ahrefs, like what you're looking at within that, but I would look at why a content result is ranking and what intent is that looking to service. And then the best way here to double check that you've nailed the right intent is to re-perform the search in Google for that particular intent. So you can imagine if I Googled at this moment in time, is bone broth beneficial? I would have received the same result back in Google for both bone broth and is bone broth beneficial. And that's actually how you check your 0 search volume query, right? Is that, okay, nobody's actually searching maybe at the time for is bone broth beneficial, but when we searched it, we got it, and we're seeing the same result work on both. And that's what you would want to do.
Yeah, and a note quickly on trying to figure out intent. I think it maybe can seem like, oh, how do you do that even? The best way that I think we've taught it and we really believe in it is really looking at what those title tags are and what are the modifiers that exist, right? We always use how to get rid of pimples, but if you go there, you'll see Bernard does a great example. It's like fast, overnight, DIY, home remedies. We teach this method of cataloging what you see on that front page and bucketing it together to learn those emerging perspectives. And the easiest way to really do that is by just simply looking at the titles. What are the adjectives and adverbs being used that are explaining more about the subject matter? So that's just a brief aside.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's why we have this idea of content themes that are coming out soon. Phil asks, are there any good templates for long content pages that you really like? I guess Wirecutter and their competitors are most likely doing a good job driving user engagement for very long content. Any others? Well, it depends.
I guess in the same vein of this one, I think Outdoor Gear Lab does a really great job of creating a long article experience that is speaking to a review where they like test like thousands of things. And so I guess that would be one that stands out in the affiliate space should you be looking for a spot like that as a good content experience.
Yeah. So you can imagine it depends basically based on the industry, the intent. Yeah, so I would say that other ones obviously that come to mind, like Healthline for medical, for pure complete informational, Wikipedia obviously is always good. And I would say, let's see, what other one? There are like aspects of them that like show up here and there when we're like inspecting the SERPs on kickoff calls for customers. But Nothing that sort of.
I mean, I think the real question is like, what do you want as a reader? If you were looking that up, what would you want to be kind of serviced with? Which is a really like basic question to ask. But
Right.
I think it's something that we almost forget about when we're SEO writing, is like, we are writing to real people who have real questions, no matter what industry you're in.
Yeah.
So what would you want to see?
Totally.
Yeah.
Elon asks, what about page description? It probably has an impact on CTR. How can this be optimized? I love this question.
Do it.
Yeah, so this goes back to our SEO consulting days. We work with the client. They're a large directory website where they have a bunch, it's like Airbnb, except for another application. And so my co-founder and I were going in, and this is back in the day when meta descriptions were still a thing that you would see in Google Webmaster Tools, the old one. And missing meta description was a problem. At some point, missing meta description was no longer a problem in the Webmaster Tools, which was interesting. We were scratching our heads saying, okay, why is that the case? In any case, you can imagine that this directory website had a templated approach, right? Best number, like places for X, right? And then variations upon what X and number like implied. And we went in and we said, okay, well, we're gonna run some Google ads to figure out what are the correct modifiers that are driving higher click-through rates, because you can do that to A/B test. This is very SEO. But you can do that to A/B test what gets higher click-through rates for a particular thing. So you can imagine, we'll use office space as an example, affordable office space, and then you run an ad on that, and you A/B test it against, say, luxury office space, and you see that affordable office space gets way more clicks, right? And that makes sense when you think about it. So that's what we did. We figured out, okay, high click-through rate intents, and we rewrote the templates for the meta description that would go out to like tens of thousands of pages. They rolled it out, and then we saw click-through rates drop by 40% pretty much overnight. And we're like, oh crap. Like, what did we do? Yeah, so what has happened with meta descriptions is that Google is simply looking at the content on your page. And it's actually A, B, C, D, E testing complete variations of what the text on the page could do to influence your click-through rate for the page. If you looked at Wikipedia, they have no meta description because they say, look, Google's just gonna figure out the best one anyways. So when it comes to meta descriptions, what we recommend is that you use a tool like Clearscope and understand that you don't need to set a meta description because the text on the page is actually already being used to fill in your meta description. And that's our take on that.
A funny way you can kind of check this out too is by, if you have an article that's ranking for two different queries, and they're slightly different, but it's the same article, go and A/B test and see what Google has pulled for that specific intent. This will like blow your mind in some cases.
Mari asks, how many backlinks would you say are needed to make a difference in rank for a piece of quality content that's an A++? Or does it depend?
She's caught on. They've caught on. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're going after best credit cards, then you probably need a lot of backlinks for Google to take a look. Whereas if you're going after a new emerging perspective, you don't. This is why Shannon has this idea. This is what we've been calling like slotting in search engine results puzzle. Is that you actually can push out perspectives from lower domain ranking websites by being better at content strategy.
Yes.
And Shannon here has like slotted in and pushed out like Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Yeah, so the sandbox tree example, we pushed it out and we included all of the like Google autocomplete features that people cared about. They wanted to see a video of the tree exploding. You needed to mention that it did explode. You needed to mention that it had fruit that exploded. And so the title that we built for social was very much like exploding fruit, right? And Google does look at that, especially in Yoast when you said it. Speaking of Yoast earlier, right? If you use that social setting, it is looking at that as well. Then we seeded in the SEO title that was more indicative to what people were like higher up searching in the monthly search volume. So like it was just a tree. What is it and where is it? Where does it grow? Which is what people cared about from an SEO perspective. And in 16 hours, we pushed that article out and slotted in the #4 slot between Britannica and Ripley's Believe It or Not. So you can influence a lot by really just doing a little closer dive on the autocomplete and the keyword search feature that we have at Clearscope.
And the competitors tab.
And the competitors tab. I
There's
love
like
that.
something in the competitors tab in Clearscope that's scoring as like really low, a C- or something, that usually indicates that that piece of content is serving a completely different intent and perspective. And that usually indicates that there's an opportunity for you to slot in to that particular position with less domain authority. This is what we've seen people do. This is what we gave a presentation on yesterday, which was search engine results puzzle, right? Because you can actually displace like lower domain ranking things for perspectives that you see showing up. All right.
Matea, hello, dude. What about using Clearscope to rank landing pages versus blog posts? Is that confusing the Google algorithm? I'll let you handle the ins and outs of landing pages.
Landing pages versus blog posts. Yeah. All right. That's a good question. So the way that I think about how Google thinks about a domain is by templates. So you can imagine a homepage has a style, right? A nav bar, whatever. And then Google will crawl to the portion of your site that's a blog and understand that there's an author box and all of these other different elements. I believe, and we've seen this happen during our consulting days as well, that each template type in isolation is actually treated as its own ecosystem. So the best thing that I can, like example I can think of off of the top of my head is that we were working with a company that was also a directory website. Directory websites usually have a lot of SEO initiatives. And they found a blog that they cared a lot about, that got a lot of organic traffic. So they acquired the blog and they 301 redirected the entire blog to their blog. And guess what? Only the blog of that website actually did well. The rest of their directory pages did not do well. So when you build links and when you build subject matter authority, I believe it's actually an isolated subject matter authority based on the types of pages that have been created, which is why I think there is a little bit of a mistake or just sort of myth that people are like, oh, if I increase my blog stuff, that's going to help my landing page stuff. I don't think it gives that same transference of one-to-one. I think that transference does occur, but it gets diluted, right? So Yelp has really strong restaurant pages and search pages, but in like some of the more newer initiatives of landing pages that they might be creating, then those are not in the same ballpark as the other types of pages. So just be aware of that and, you know, kind of invest in the right page types when you're doing that. Finally coming almost to an end, 3 questions.
3 more.
Anonymous attendee, if content within a cluster isn't working over an extended period, can you bring those articles to life by expanding your authority within that cluster? Or are you better off bailing on that cluster and focus on what's working better? Is Google's view of your authority permanent? I would say that Google's authority view is not permanent, but I would say that there's business objectives and there's SEO objectives. And if moving off of working on that cluster is moving you away from your business objective, then I would say you probably don't want to do that. You probably want to still focus on the content that's going to be driving value for your business and continue to work on that. Again, if you're kind of in the, we call it like the zone of misery, which is like right here.
So good. It's so true.
The little wobble.
Yeah.
So that's where you're gonna go, okay, is it a backlink problem? Is it a subject matter authority problem? And sort of just keep hitting that with different solutions.
Yeah.
All right, Anonymous asks, do you think it's possible to write too perfect of a piece can a decent sized article cover the topic too well?
Wow. Well, it's interesting. First is too perfect of a piece. So I think, again, it's what does the search query deserve? If the search query deserves a bite-sized, digestible answer, then it would just behoove you to serve that up. Now, I think you would wonder, like, perfect is an interesting word, because it's like, are we talking about, an A++? Is it that it's already gaining traction? Are you worried about something already failing? But basically, I think it's really about what does that search query deserve? I think you can write too perfect of a piece, and that is really that skyscraper approach, the ultimate guide. So we're kind of saying that we're seeing kind of a fall in that. It's not really about a decent size article. It's about what does it actually deserve. And some things are going to take 1,000 words to explain, and some are going to take 500. And both of those have value in your content archive. You just have to understand the value they're providing, right? You don't want to aim for an educational resource topic that needs 1,000 words with a shorter answer. And I wouldn't want to serve a shorter answer, that's something that deserves a shorter answer with a very long, arduous piece. You're going to have people clicking out of that and just going to another article altogether. And Google's going to see that and say, oh, well, I don't want to really serve this in the experimentation queue. It's likely that they would if you keep seeing drop-offs like that. So I think it is possible then. I think that's the answer.
Yeah.
It's what does it deserve?
Yeah. Pair it all together, right? Intent, content experience, associations.
A++.
How much should content change or not change when republishing? What if nothing new has happened for the topic, even if it's a high search volume topic? Should you still republish? I think we touched upon this earlier, but I guess this was asked like 30 minutes ago.
Oh, yes, totally.
Yeah. But I'd say like 10 to 20% of the body of the content should change, just based on what we've
seen to work for a refresh.
I've certainly kind of dabbled there, just writing scripts that like refreshed, changed the timestamp. And for a time, Google respected it without the core content actually changing. And then Google stopped respecting it. And then we just like wrote another script to then like kind of reorder the body content, doing SEO-y things back in the day. And then that sort of like got it to start working again. And so it's just a hypothesis that some percentage, probably 10-ish to 20, has to change. And that's just to say that, the idea is that you shouldn't change content to simply change content. You should change content because the topic has evolved to a significant manner to merit a change. And then
they're also a little bit about calendaring here too. Like, what if nothing new has happened? Should you still republish? I would say you should just really be aware of, is your material still comprehensively covering it? There could be an emerging perspective that has crept up in there that you might be missing, even if it doesn't change that frequently. There still could be an emerging perspective there for experimentation. So I would recommend looking at your body of content, like at least on a yearly basis, just to kind of see and make sure that your assumptions are right. And I think that question is really about, yes, you always want to gut check your assumptions just to make sure that it has not changed, because it could have, and you just like Google AMP can go to hell. Like, that's a great example. Like, I was sleeping on that example until yesterday when Bernard showed it to me, and I was like, oh, wow, yeah, cool. So yeah, check your gut assumptions.
Totally.
In tandem.
Well, look, it's been
we did it.
A long hour and 40 minutes. I appreciate everybody who has spent their time with us today. Again, we're going to drop everybody a recording on YouTube. If you have any additional questions or thoughts, follow us on Twitter, getting that off the ground as well. Again, we have lots of great content planned for the upcoming weeks. If you have any other cool content strategy folks, SEO people, writers even, that you want to hear from, we want to know that. We want to fine-tune these presentations to make them better. We want to know, if they should be more actionable, more Q&A, like what we just did here. So obviously stay tuned.
We're really at your mercy. What you suggest, we'll try. So if you have a thought, shoot it our way. But it's been so great to chat with all of you. And wow, 43 questions. I thought we were going to get like 3. So you guys totally impressed me on really put us through our paces over here. Our knowledge of SEO.
Yes. All right. Thanks so much, y'all.
Yeah.